Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards. Because we are the best. And we're not wizards. No matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for 2019. Why is he singing? Why wouldn't he be singing? Because I know who I'm about to speak to. You don't know who I'm about to speak to. It's all so much fun. It's like, I don't know, I want to do something spontaneous or maybe even something quite sporadic. I have no idea. I don't know. Could it be one person joining me? Could it be the other person joining me? Is it the guy asking the questions? Is it the guy with the bulging sack? We have no idea. All we know. Joining me. I know him from Sporadically Board. You might know him from Solo Mode Games. It's Mike DiLisio.
Richard, it's a complete joy. And here's a little something for you. I'll be your guest for 2019. Oh, wow. Thank you.
That's it.
I was going to say for February, but you went with 2019, so I had to follow your lead because I don't know when this is going to actually air.
It could air any time at all, but I mean, for doing that, this stuff's getting edited right now, and it's going out as soon as possible.
Let's live stream it. Can we make that happen?
You know, I think I wouldn't want to because I don't think these people have done anything that terrible to deserve a live stream.
Yeah, I've already punished them enough. Don't you think?
I'm pretty sure that us live streaming would be punishment for shoplifting in some countries. Line them up and let them watch. Thank you very, very much for coming on. I'm so kind of delightfully excited because, I was kind of doing a build-up and I started off with Dan Hughes, and so then I built up to Matthew Jude. And I was like scaling Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm getting to the summit. I'm having a stop halfway through by speaking to the likes of Isaac Vega,
sure,
and even Jerry Hawthorne to get to the
keep
man,
going. You're almost up there.
The mountain, it's yourself. I don't think I can do any other episodes after I've spoken to you.
Well, Richard, I'm glad somebody said it. I wasn't going to say it, but I'm glad somebody said it. Look, I'm sure all those people you just mentioned are feeling very, very proud right now to be mentioned in the same breath as me. But it's a joy to be here. It's lovely. It's lovely. And it's just wonderful to hear your lovely voice again. And it's music to my ears, Richard.
It is. I'm just the only reason I've got you on is because I know you've got a fantastic board game collection. I knew you would have video, and it allows me to kind of cover the Heroes of Land, air and sea that I can see behind that.
I'm caressing it.
I know you're touching it again. Stop doing that.
It's hard to avoid.
I don't mind you being topless. It's fine, just as long as you're not.
Well, look, we agreed to that beforehand. I have a few lists of demands, and one of them is always to record topless.
But when you were talking about solo mode games, I didn't realise that would involve.
Please don't divulge my secrets.
I'm not gonna.
All right.
You are Sporadically Board kind of came along, and it's become a firm favourite of mine.
Well, thank you.
Just because of the nature of how you and Dan Hughes seem to kind of gel and have a chat. And how did you two kind of end up being these couple of star-crossed podcast chatters? Was there a balcony scene? It
was a star-kissed night, Richard, when this all came together. I'll try. Well, look, the structure of your show, one of the reasons why I enjoy it is that you allow people to just kind of ramble. So I was going to give you the short version, but I'll just give you the regular version.
That's fine.
Basically, it started with This Game is Broken, the show that Dan and Matthew kind of started that whole juggernaut going. And I came on as a guest, and so that's how I got to kind of know Dan and the rest of the crew there. And so I made multiple guest appearances, I guess you can say, on the show, and became friendly with them all. And then I had really not done any podcasting. I'd been a guest on a couple of shows. I was on the Meeple Overboard show, and I did a little thing with, do you know Asdrubal, the retro gamer on Dice Tower? Yeah, I did it. He did a podcast with a friend of his. So I really had no podcasting experience. I'm not sure I still do, but anyway, I really had no experience then. And when Dan ended up leaving, This Game is Broken, he and I just kept in touch. We would talk and just kind of pretty much do what we do with the microphones on now, but just because we were, friends and talking. I got to meet him and Matthew and the Murphs and Dave at Dice Tower Con last year. And that's really when kind of I became, friends with them. Yeah. And so in the course of Dan and I talking, I brought up that I was thinking about doing some podcasting because I enjoyed the experience on This Game is Broken so much. And so it was really like everything that has happened with Sporadically Board to the present day. It was really, really organic, really low key, extremely unplanned. We just kind of started, talking about, he was really kind of helping me come up with ideas for things I might want to do. Dan is an ideas guy, as he has said on many occasions. And so, I had this kind of somewhat of a framework of what I wanted to do. And Dan, within 20 seconds, came up with, 5 or 10 different ways to improve that framework. And so what I was originally planning to do was a little bit more involved and needed a lot more planning and things along those lines. And through the course of talking, he and I just thought, man, wouldn't it be nice to just do something kind of on our own terms where we do it when we want to do it. We don't have a tremendous amount of pre-production and, we just like talking to each other. That's really all it's about. And what I think from what I've heard when it is connecting with people, what they tend to like is it just sounds like they're sitting in on a conversation. So that's really what it is. That's where it came from. And as long as we continue to want to do it, we'll just keep doing it like that.
I think what I like about it, and this isn't kind of like 45 minutes of blowing smoke up your ass. I will be quite critical and potentially hurting and cutting later on. I will make sure it'll be like almost like tweezers in the nose.
Right.
Plucking out the occasional hair, which I'm gonna aim for.
Sure.
But what I like about it is the fact that the conversation always kind of starts off in a let's not talk about board games. I mean, was that a conscious decision to say, actually, whatever we do, don't mention the boards, don't mention the cardboard? Is that how you kind of started? Was that something that you started off with? Or?
I guess as planned as anything we've done, and I know that he and I both like to kind of play that up, but that really, and I think I mentioned this before, so I apologize you're not getting the premiere of this thought, but basically our lack of planning was very planned, if that makes sense. We did, and that's where the title for the show, which Dan came up with, which was much better than mine, was based around this idea of we'll record sporadically whenever we feel the call, and we will not be hemmed into that kind of traditional board game podcast format that, look, it can be done and it is done very well by a number of different podcasts, but there are so many different ways to approach this hobby. And we just knew that what appealed to us was that's going to be kind of the overarching theme is we both have a love for board games. The people that we bring on the show are going to have some kind of a connection with board games, generally speaking. but we're not going to allow ourselves to get hemmed in with a very strict format of, well, what did you play this week? We might talk about that, but it's not going to be necessarily something where, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's, do you know what it is? I think there's a difficulty when you're creating some kind of content to make sure you're concentrating on that content.
Mm-hmm.
As in, if you're making a board game podcast, people make it about they'll make it about what they're expecting it to do. And I think it takes a little bit of courage to kind of step away from that. I mean, personally, I talk about the person, like what I said when I was on Sporadically Board. This is not about board games. We kind of talk about board games.
Sure.
But I'm using board games as an excuse to talk to you.
Right.
There's no other two ways about it. You
right.
know? The whole reason that, we might talk board games, we might not talk board games, but that was kind of interesting. I'm interested in finding out about the people kind of behind it, which is, and as I say, other people, you'll have a format, but it will generally be driven by the kind of the board game side of it. In terms of how you got involved in the hobby, has this been something? Are you been involved for years? I mean, have you been doing this, is it a little boy kind of thing? Is it something you got back into quite recently again? I mean, where was your kind of like your journey in regards to that?
Yeah, well, games were something that I would say was part of my life growing up. It was not a major part of my life growing up. I mean, we had the, kind of the mass market games, and we would play them on a regular, somewhat regular basis. I remember having games that, I hadn't really thought about this memory until I kind of got, and by my own volition, tagged into the solo gamer thing. I remember as a kid, do you remember that old Crossbows and Catapults game?
Yeah,
it was just a bunch of plastic, right?
Yeah.
And I remember setting that up on the kitchen of our apartment, on the floor of the kitchen, linoleum, right? And I set up both sides, and I was just shooting back and forth. I was playing by myself. I just wanted to play with the toys. You know what I mean? So I played with those, type of games, kind of mass market games. But probably my biggest kind of childhood memories of gaming would be playing cards at my grandmother's house. We would play Pinochle. And I remember pretty young, preteen, learning how to play Pinochle and really enjoying that because it allowed me to interact with the adults. Being able to play it on, I was never going to be the best player at the table, but it wasn't like they had to adjust their play because I was at the table. You know what I mean? I could hold my own. And so that was something early on that gave me a real sense of, accomplishment and maybe being able to handle a game that I knew was, or at least I thought was a little above my ears. So I remember that, playing Racco and games like that with my grandmother. So that was, my earliest. And then video games took over, the Atari 2600, the Commodore 64, ColecoVision and television. I was really more into video games as a teenager, or a tween, whatever they're calling them now. And then really nothing through I would say what would be for most people the college years, but was for me more the working years. I went back to college later.
Okay.
I didn't play a lot of games. I was much more into listening to music, hanging out with friends, things along those lines. I really was pretty much removed from most gaming. I would video game here and there. And I've got kind of that classic, really almost cliched story now where I was introduced to Catan with from a couple that had played it. And so I played Catan, and that changed it. That was everything. Within a few weeks of that, I was at a actual hobby game store, and I think the first game I bought was Lost Cities, Knizia, the little two-player card game.
Yeah.
And discovered BGG, Board Game Geek, and it was I'm a very much a collector. I think Dan and I, in some way, although he doesn't like the well, I don't want to speak for Dan, but he has expressed that maybe some of the commercialism aspects of things bother him, right? I mean, that's kind of almost his thing to an extent.
Yeah.
But I do think that he has mentioned that when he gets interested in something, he goes full out, just like this whole, 3D printer silliness that was going on. He wanted to know everything about it. I've got something very similar. Like, I used to collect music voraciously, and it wasn't enough for me to collect the music. I would always know, okay, who was the producer of this album? Where was it recorded? Who was the engineer? I always just remembered that stuff. I couldn't remember things that had any actual value to my life, but I can remember that stuff. And so board gaming fed into that same almost obsessive, I don't want to put a negative spin on it, but there is, for me, a little bit of obsessiveness that plays into this hobby.
No.
Where I kind of fixate on it. I'm thinking about it when I'm not playing, and you know what I mean?
No, I think it's far easier to get caught up in, and that's in the wave. And we talk about the cult of the new.
Yeah.
But we also talk about the cult of the classics as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's very, is it the validation? Because I hear from time to time people talking about the gatekeeping side of things, and sometimes you'll go in a Facebook group, and somebody will talk about playing a particular game, and then they'll get a raft of maybe 3 or 4 people that will be coming in and telling them that's a terrible game, that they should never be playing it, that they can't really, it's not really a board game, come back when you're fully grown and you can play with the rest of the kids in the yard kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that it's easy to get swept along and realise that there's certain games that you potentially have to have played or got involved in. I've played an electronic version of Catan. I've never played Catan.
You're still a gamer, Richard.
I don't care.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all.
Do you know what I mean? I don't, but I think it's almost like, and I think we're getting there with this hobby, but it's maybe kind of when people are introduced to the hobby in the first place, it's kind of letting them kind of find their own way.
Right.
And there's so many games nowadays.
Yep.
But there's so many, but it's this kind of like having to constantly kind of keeping up to date with it, and I'm stepping back from it myself.
In what sense?
In the kind of not chasing after every single thing that is kind of coming out. I mean, I joke with Elizabeth on the show that I didn't have a copy of Wingspan.
Right.
And she was like, well, how dare you kind of talk to me without playing?
Sure.
I mean, it was a joke. I mean, she was a fantastic guest, and we had a whale of a time kind of speaking to each other. But I guess I'm trying to be more picky because I'm looking, I guess I've been in that place where I was like, I've got to get this, I've got to get a game, I've got to get another game, I've got to get this game. And now I'm looking at it kind of going, I want to play the games that I have.
Yeah.
Is that part of what encouraged you to go down the solo route? To make sure that the stuff that you had was getting played?
That is the reason. That's the reason that I got into solo gaming. I didn't have that as a background at all. It was a sense that as I got more and more involved in the hobby, and I got into that first flush that many of us have, especially if, I got into games quite a bit later in life where I had a little bit more of disposable income than maybe I would have had in my 20s. You know what I mean? And so I was in a position where, okay, I didn't just go crazy, but I did get caught up in that kind of flush of the new, exciting, and I bought a bunch of games, and anything that slightly seemed interesting to me, I bought, right? And so I found myself with that familiar feeling that a lot of us have, or at least have had, of games that weren't getting played, and it caused me a bit of anxiety. And so the more I looked into it, the more I realized that some of these games that I had bought had ways to play solo. And I didn't buy them for that purpose. I didn't even pay any attention to it when I bought them. And as I started to play those games, I found that it relieved some of that anxiety that I had over games not being played. I knew that if a game had a solo variant, that it would at least get played by me. I might not be able to get, my group interested in playing it, or may not even be able to get a group of people together to play it, but it was something that I could potentially play by myself. And I found that it was also it was a way for me to kind of, as odd as it sounds, turn my brain off.
No, No.
Because
I see that.
you have to focus on this discrete puzzle that you're working on. And that's why most solo games are puzzles, when you break it down to it. And that allows me to kind of remove my brain from the aspects maybe that had been causing me some anxiety or stress or, frustration or whatever the case may be. It's a bit of a meditative space for me when I'm solo gaming.
Yeah, it's something you can take. It's entirely at your own pace as well.
Mm-hmm. That's another
there's a
aspect.
difference with because I hear people talk, well, why don't you just put a video game on? And it's kind of like, well, because I'm still not in control of the sense of urgency for the game.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. It's very difficult for me to say, right, okay, I'm just going to get myself a quick cup of coffee, or I'm going to have a biscuit, or I'm going to nip to the toilet or something like that.
Right.
Or, video games are still this is here and now, it's bright and flashy and stuff like that. I can sit down in front of a game, be playing it solo, and I can take an hour on that bad boy, or if I want to make it last the entire evening, I can just sit there safe in the knowledge that I can kind of pack it away at any time. I can leave it as it is at any time. And you're right, you can sit there and just it's not you're concentrating on something simplistic that you're in control of as well, and you can just let yourself kind of drift.
Absolutely.
Is there any games that surprised you in terms of the solo mode versus the kind of the multiplayer mode, that you've enjoyed the solo mode an awful lot more than when you played with a group?
Oh, okay. That's a different direction that I thought the question was going to go. A game that I enjoyed solo more, you know what? There are, and the answer is yes. There are some games that I have actually liked better solo than when I was playing with other players. And generally speaking, it's because of the pacing. When I've found that that's been the case, and it's not that often that I will like a solo mode more. I might like it as well as, and a lot of times they're very discrete experiences, right? Where they're the same game with the same mechanics, but they don't feel the same when other people are involved. There are some games that are, kind of that multiplayer solitaire thing that don't change that much whether there are other people around the table or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but when I don't like those as much, it's usually, like I said, some kind of a pacing issue where I feel like I know what I want to do. Nothing that the other people at the table are doing are going to affect me at all, and yet I still need to wait for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's a lot of Euros are like that, where you're only taking, the only reason you can't take that resource is because somebody else is taking that resource. And you're kind of playing, you're not having a direct interaction really with anyone else. And some people really, really like that.
Right.
And other people are I'm kind of one of these people that I guess I don't mind sometimes, because I'm getting involved in the social aspect of it.
Right.
But sometimes I have played games and I've sat there, I've just went, well, why? This could be 17 players regardless.
Sure. Exactly.
It's not going to, it's just somebody at the end is going to go, I got 52 points and I'm going to go third again. Fantastic.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, I wish I could think of the examples, but there are times where, it's just something that if I'm going to play that game, I'm going to probably want to play it by myself just because I like to be able to do it at my own pace. I have had discussions with Dan before about analysis paralysis, and everyone, I think anybody can be prone to it. I think there are some people that's their fallback, is that they pretty much are going to be very deliberate and slow every turn. But I think there are even people who, I like to think of myself as a pretty quick turn taker. And there are still times where I find myself agonizing over something. But in solo gaming, that just isn't an issue. You know what I mean? The only one you have to worry about is yourself. What has been interesting, though, Richard, is that when I have a camera behind me, right, and I'm filming a solo game, that's a very different experience, because I find myself being very conscious of the amount of time I'm taking, because there's a little bit of a line that I find that I walk, which is I want as much as I can to vocalize what my thought processes are while I'm playing, because I think that gives people a good idea of what it feels like to play the game, right? Even if their thought processes aren't the same as mine, if they're looking at me and they see an obvious move and they're like, "You're an idiot, do this," you know what I mean? Which I'm assuming most people do is look at me play and go, "Well, here's a good way to learn how not to play." But while I'm talking about what I'm doing, I'm also being very conscious of, okay, don't have too much dead air. Don't get so caught up in what you're doing that you forget that there's a camera there and you're just sitting there, staring at the board for 25, 30 seconons.
I can just imagine me getting ready to go for a shower or something like that and just going stripping all the way stripping all the way down, just walking out, coming back in, drying off.
Yeah.
And then considering that's, because I would just get kind of lost in the moment. So is it?
You've given me some ideas, Richard. This is a whole new revenue stream I've got going.
I think it's kind of like grooming, and I think there could. I'm not being funny, but I've been to a few conventions where a little bit of education in the old washing under the old pitaroos. Definitely. It could definitely. I'm not going to go there because I know that it can be a contentious issue, but with that in mind, I mean, when you're filming, are you scripting?
Oh God, no.
Do you play? Do you kind of like make sure I'm going to play this section, or do you just start from the beginning?
Yeah, no. I generally speaking never script anything. There have been 2 videos that I scripted because they were 2-minute videos that I was doing for the Dice Tower, and I wanted to make sure these were never videos that were for my just kind of talking. Those are never scripted. I think of a general idea of what I want to talk about, and I try to get it out in around 2 minutes, for better or for worse. And I think it shows. But there were a couple of videos where I was kind of highlighting a particular game, and I was like, okay, I have a lot of stuff I want to cover in 2 minutes. If I leave it to my own devices, I'm not going to get it all in. So I actually wrote it down. But for the vast, basically every playthrough video is completely unscripted. And so there has been, I want to say 1 time, maybe 2, where I filmed the first time that I played a game. And I made a very conscious decision to do that, and I made it clear in the video that, hey, I'm filming the first time I'm playing this game, so warts and all, you're going to see what it's like to try to learn this from the rules, and it was, generally speaking, for games that were a little bit simpler. For games that are a little bit more complex, I try to play through the game multiple times and, basically set up the camera and just go. Again, for better or for worse, that's been, how I've done it. And it really started with trying to do the best I could with the limitations that I had, technically and experientially. I had my little $10, I'd bring the camera, or bring it over to the camera, but it's not going to help our listeners. But I had my little $10 Amazon tripod. My first videos were just on this iPhone right here that I still have, my iPhone 6, which is almost now a brick. But so my first videos were on that. I had no microphone. I had really cheap umbrella lights. And I just, kind of did the best I could. As time went on, I got a little bit more advanced with the equipment, but I'm still just using the iMovie that gets preloaded on my Mac. This is a difficult thing for me, Richard, in that I struggle with myself. Part of me is like, I want to take this as a pride, badge of honor, as, hey, I've got this DIY ethic. I'm going to try to get by on the strength of my personality, and hopefully I have a unique voice, and that's what's going to get people. But I have to also be honest, and a lot of that has to do with laziness. You know what I mean? It's because I don't want to spend 45 hours on YouTube videos figuring out the best way to light my videos and the best way, to learn Adobe Premiere. And I have the desire for my stuff to look good, but not enough to devote the amount of money and resources in time to do it. You know what I mean? I guess I'm somewhat happy with how things are. There are niggling things that bother me. Like I wish I would be a little bit better about getting a consistent autofocus on my camera. It never seems to work exactly the way I want. And I'm sure if I did a little bit more research and actually looked into things, I could probably get that better, but not enough for me to really do it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, with the board game media itself, I think it's got a long way to go in terms of getting audience.
Right.
I mean, even the biggest guys that we've got are still relatively small fish compared to a guy who's, demonstrating this is how you make meringues.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Exactly.
He's got 3.5 million views. And remember, we're just going to add a little bit of vinegar here because that helps with the whitening of the eggs kind of thing.
And whisking. You must whisk. Yeah.
Is there a new way to approach content? I mean, you mentioned, obviously, at the beginning being involved in This Game is Broken.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that This Game is Broken became so popular is because nobody had really done a quiz show before.
Right.
But I'm not seeing anything new. And I'm guilty of this. I'm not seeing anything new. I mean, I think James Hudson?
Yeah.
He posted a kind of a video. He says, was it Take My Chits or something like that?
Right.
Was posting kind of the best chat up lines for board games. Yep. And saying, I'm challenging everybody who's a content creator to kind of bring up with something kind of new and imaginative and something like that.
Right.
And I kind of understand where he's coming from, but I also understand that it's a hell of a lot of work.
It really is. It really is.
And it's really, really difficult to put yourself out there to be doing something more than sometimes like a talking head.
Right.
Or how do you do a different playthrough? Do you go down the level of what maybe Shut Up and Sit Down have done, which the stuff that they do is fantastic and remarkable. There's other guys like Slicker Drips out there that have done some really good things. Luke Hector seems to be growing on the Broken Meeple. He seems to be doing, but he's again doing kind of talking heads. Are we? I don't know. Would you want to be the pioneer that's going kind of out there, kind of doing the things? Do you want to play it safe? Do you want to do something new? Because I don't know if I was like doing a playthrough of, say, Dinosaur Island and I started pretending to be kind of like David Attenborough or doing Jeff Goldblum impressions halfway through, you didn't know, you want to take it and throw it back and you ripped it out and doing that. Good. If that would turn somebody kind of off doing that, is it the safe option? Are we taking the safe option, Mike, here? Is this where we are with media at the moment? Well,
here's what I would say to that. I think that it matters less what you're doing. It matters more, is that being true to who you are, and is that playing to to what your strengths are? So I would say this. Yeah. If you're trying to be wacky and you're not, it doesn't come off well, and it's going to look and feel forced. If that's who you are, I mean, you mentioned the Take Your Chits, that I don't know him at all. Christian is his name, right?
Yeah, it's Christian. Yeah.
I don't believe I've ever met Christian before, but the impression I get is that those videos are who he is.
Yes.
That's him, right?
Yeah.
Lucky for him that he has a talent and he's got an authenticity that comes across, and it happens to be who he is, right? I think that there are people, and I don't know if sad is the right word, but I think that there are people that really would like to be involved in the creative part of this hobby that maybe just don't have that natural presence. Right?
Yeah.
And they try to force it, where they might be better off just finding a way to express their passion, because it's not that they're not passionate about the hobby or what they're talking about. It's that maybe they haven't found their voice yet. And so they're trying to do something outside of the box just for the sake of it being outside of the box, or a very look at me now type of a thing.
Yeah, no, I get it totally. They
you know
want
what
to
I
be
mean?
the guy. Yeah, they want to be the guy in the middle of the party, dancing on the table,
right.
two dancing queen,
Yeah.
you know, shirt above the head,
Yeah.
swirling in a tornado, when actually they're probably better suited to be the guy in the kitchen who's making a cocktail that is about to put the dog in a coma,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah, if he's a great cocktail maker, you know, go with that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, exactly. And I think it's kind of playing to the skills as well. As I say, we're still kind of evolving, and I see what you mean. When you look at, say, videos by Shut Up and Sit Down, like, you know, Quinn's and Matt Lee's, they've got such a presence, they've got a way of presenting themselves. But if you look, they used to do video game stuff.
Yeah. I never actually saw their video game stuff.
They've not just sat there, you know, they've not just appeared on the board game scene from something. They've been used to being kind of very, very kind of live stream, in your face, making content. They've got a natural talent for it. But at the same time, say somebody like Rodney Smith.
Yeah.
He's deliberate. He's patient.
Right.
He's calming.
Yep.
You know, he could read me a bedtime story anytime he wants. Because, you know,
doesn't he? He gives me a bedtime story at least once a week.
I knew it. He keeps giving me excuses. Not this week, Richard. Not this week.
Right.
You know, and that's all I get all the time. Well, of course, I suppose you'd have to get a plane. He is going to AirCon, though.
That's very exciting. Yeah, I heard Mark Cook talking about that. Second time. He was there last year, wasn't he?
He was there last year as well. Yeah. That's going to be an awkward conversation. Hi, Rodney. I'm a big fan. Could you record you reading this Gruffalo book for me? Thanks.
There's this book, Rodney, called Goodnight Moon. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'd love for you to.
And if you could read the last line, "I love you to the moon and back," just twice.
And if you can put my name in there every so often. I don't want to ask too much, but you know.
A hug? No. So, it's just, you know, but I don't know. In terms of kind of like things like, I mean, some of the bigger names out there, like say like Scythe. You're a big lover of Scythe. You know, it's not, you know, Matthew Jude went on some kind of soliloquy about how much he liked Scythe when he was on the show. Right. But in terms of games like that, are they doing solo mode well? I mean, is the Scythe is it the Automata or Automaton or however you pronounce it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's Automa. Yeah.
You say Automa, I say Automata.
Let's call the whole thing off.
But is that how you do solo mode well? I mean, are there games like that do it well, and are there games that you've had to house rule?
Okay.
And say this is awful.
Right. Well, that's how you do that game well, I think. Scythe is a game that has a lot of interlocking parts. I don't think that it lends itself well to a block of space and you have your own efficiency puzzle and do the best you can. I mean, you've got the potentiality of combat, you've got resource management, you've got area control. The fact that they were able to make a legitimate solo game out of Scythe is, to me, incredible. And because it's that Automa team, right? That has kind of been a part of the Stonemaier games for quite a while. The Automa that you see in Viticulture, right, is very different from the Automa you see in Scythe, although they were designed by the same team. Morton Monrad Peterson is the kind of the main guy, and he has other people that work on that team too. The Automa for Viticulture is basically what I mentioned before, which is that at the beginning of every round, you flip over a card and it's going to tell you where to place AI workers to block spots. That's really all it's doing is blocking spots. It starts at 20 points. It's going to end at 20 points. Your goal is by the end of those rounds, however many rounds it is, have more points than the Automa. Deal with the tactical puzzle of, oh shoot, they're blocking the spot that I wanted. How do I work around that? That works in a worker placement game like Viticulture, and it works quite well, actually. It's a nice little puzzle. But in Scythe, there's so much going on, right? Or in a game like, why can't I think of the name of Anachrony, which was done by a different designer, David, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because
it's Turtsey.
Is it pronounced Turtsey? Okay, good. I thought I would destroy it. Yeah. He's a phenomenal.
No, I wrote it down. I wrote it down because I spoke to him before, and I was like, it's imprisoned in my head.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal, not only game designer but solo variant designer, because he'll design solo modes for games he didn't design as well. But for those types of games, you need to have more than block a spot, right? So it depends. It depends on the type of game. Some games you need to have a little bit more, as a player, as a solo player, you have to be responsible for more management and administration of the bot. And sometimes it's more trouble than it's worth, quite honestly. If the game is a simple game and I'm spending more time trying to figure out how to make the bot do its turn than I am on my turns, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But there are some games that demand that level of and as long as I'm still getting enough out of my turn, then I'll do it. Now, I will say that I am not a big house ruler. If I feel like if a game needs to be house ruled, then I'm probably just out at that point.
Yeah.
There's too many other games to play that are well enough designed that I don't have to try to play junior designer myself. You know what I mean? Luckily, I haven't had too many of those. I mean, the other thing is that you've got kind of this little, I don't know if you'd call it a controversy, but it's certainly a topic of note in the solo gaming community of, is there any value for high score variance in solo games where you're not trying to beat an opponent, an automated opponent, but you're just strictly trying to reach a high score plateau, maybe trying to beat your high score. And a lot of the Uwe Rosenberg games do this. And for me, depending on the game, I'm fine with that. I'd prefer to have, a definitive win-loss condition, but especially in a puzzle game, I don't mind having, now what has been cool is that over the years, even those high score variants, they've found ways to make them a little bit more satisfying. Maybe they'll have objectives that you're trying to obtain as well. Like Dinosaur Island is an example of this. There's no opponent you're fighting against, but you've got 10 objective cards and you're trying to complete as many of those as you can. That's cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's a way to give the player a little bit more feeling of agency. So that's another I've been really long-winded, Richard. What's the matter with me?
This is what I do.
Yeah, you're letting me.
I come across as chatty, but I just go, okay, I'm going to lead him down this path.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to lead him over here.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to subconsciously drop this phrase into here and see how he kind of runs with it. Have you been tempted to look at solo modes yourself? Have you put together a solo mode for a particular game, or is there a solo mode that you would love to have for a particular game?
I have been tempted. The closest I've come was there's a game called Sentient that is Renegade Games, J. Alex Kevern, a little. It's a little kind of like math puzzle game almost, where it's the theme is these AI sentient robots, right?
Yeah.
But it's really just arithmetic. You're trying to do dice. Have you played it?
No.
It's actually much more interesting than I'm making it sound. It's a dice placement game where you draft dice and you're trying to place them on these cards in a particular pattern to gain the most points. And there was somebody that mentioned on Board Game Geek asking, hey, is there a solo mode for this? And the designer came on, and I want to say the designer came on or somebody else came on and said, no, I had an idea of something like this. And I kind of took that kernel of an idea and turned it into an actual, fully playable one. Now, was it any good? I have no idea. I played it a few times. A few people on the thread played it and seemed to like it. It certainly didn't, take off and lead to anything at all. Nor was I trying to have it do that. But that's the closest I've come. Sure, there are games that I wish had solo modes, I suppose, but most times if I'm honest with myself, they probably wouldn't work out well. There's probably a reason why they don't have one, but there are other games that I think, I bet they could have made a good solo variant out of this. I'm not going to, but I bet somebody could have, I'm trying to think of specifics. I will tell you this, and I mentioned this on another podcast, so I apologize, but I'll say it with more passion here.
Thank you.
A game that I didn't think would be able to pull off a solo variant that actually is quite good is Giant Killer Robots, GKR Heavy Hitters.
Yes.
Which is a pure skirmish, in your face, robot versus robot. And I thought, how on the earth are you going to be able to make a solo variant out of this? And it's actually good. I mean, and I know this because I played that first, and then I played a multiplayer game. And while the multiplayer game was clearly better, it wasn't that much better. I mean, I was like, man, this really pulled off this feeling of fighting this other robot. It was great. So every so often I get surprised.
I played it on Friday. And,
is that right?
Yeah. I think because there was a guy at the club, and this has been going on for like 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought it in one week, and he says, "Oh, we've got to play it." And then it was that usual thing about it's like flipping Pluto orbiting the sun.
Uh-huh.
You know, your Pab Saturn, we're passing each other eventually, like once every 600 days or something. And we got sat down on Friday and actually played it. And it's one of these games that the base game, if you played 2 rounds, you'd go, yeah, okay,
right,
I get it. You start getting these faction cards which are messing with people's abilities and stuff like that. And it just goes completely tactical. It gets absolutely beautiful and wonderful. It's like you're going down as well. It's like this thing where you play a card and you're saying, right, okay, sorry, you're stalling, you can't do anything, or I'm going to jump out and then I'm going to jump back in again.
Yep.
Or you can't play any of these moves, or you can't use this, and it just turns it. And I was like, and it again makes me think, have I got too many games that I should maybe be cutting back what I have and playing what I have more?
Right.
Because it is like me buying a video game and playing the first 5 hours of that video game.
Yeah.
And not even getting past into learning that, you know, I was surprised myself. This is one of the Assassin's Creed games, Syndicate or something.
Mm-hmm.
I figured I'd put like 200 hours into it. I was looking at like a board game, like say, you know, even Root.
Yeah.
And it's maybe 15, 20 hours. And that's one of my favourite, you know, it's one of my, you know, definitely one of my favourites. Ashes is more, but I couldn't say I've maybe even put as much as maybe 30 hours into that game. You know, it's the same.
Right.
It's the same. Yeah, but yeah, Giant Killer Robots was an awful lot of fun, and I'm interested to see what they do with District 9, because they've got District 9 coming out.
They do.
Next month.
I know.
I'm really interested to see.
I got a little bit of a sneak peek at it at somebody's house here locally that had a copy of the pre-production. But I just got a really quick glimpse. I resisted temptation to start playing with it, but it looked pretty good. It did look pretty good.
I was really surprised by the quality of GKR.
It's amazing.
When it arrived. It's it's one of these. It's in my pile with Mechs vs. Minions and Catacombs. As you know, Mice and Mystics,
right? And
you know, it's one in Root itself.
You're right.
Is one of these special magical games that kind of looks on its kind of visuals.
Yep.
Do you get sent, or do you get contacted at all by companies who are looking to get their solo versions of their games played?
Not a lot. I a little bit, and I think part of the reason is that I'm not aggressive about that at all. I don't very actively court publishers. The closest I came really was last year. I kind of made a concerted effort because I was working Origins and Gen Con. I was working full time with the Dice Tower, and I kind of made a concerted effort to spend some time at those cons, going out kind of with my solo mode / Dice Tower hat on. This was before I was doing the podcast, and talk to publishers. And I did. And so last year I did bring home some versions of games from publishers, some review copies, so to speak. Part of the issue is that I don't really review games, right? I do playthroughs more than anything else. On Dice Tower, sometimes I'll do what might be a mini review, I guess would be as close as you'd get. By far the most critical I'll get, and I don't mean critical as far as saying something bad, but talking about the pros and cons is going to be on podcasting, honestly. Yeah. I talk about games in a critical light in podcasting much more than I do on video, but I don't get a lot. Now, I will say that I've developed a relationship with Shem Phillips of Garfield Games, who I absolutely adore. He's just an incredible guy, and from very early on supported what I was doing. So I started just on my own making videos of his games because I liked them, right? And so I did a video for Raiders of the North Sea, and I did, even though that doesn't solo, I did that one with my son. Then I did a video for Explorers of the North Sea, which does have a solo variant. And from that, I'm trying to remember if I reached out. He may have reached out to me to do a playthrough video for the expansion of Explorers of the North Sea for their preview. And so that was the first time that I did a Kickstarter preview video for the Rocks of Ruin expansion for Explorers of the North Sea. And from there on out, he's, had me do one. I did one for Architects of the West Kingdom. That was, I was part of that Kickstarter campaign. I just literally today uploaded a private unlisted link, sir, for the new Paladins of the West Kingdom. And I'm right now, I'm looking at my, my desktop. I see flashing that I have a Facebook message from Shem, and I'm hoping that it doesn't, I'm not going to click on it after we're done. And it says, this is a horrible video, but that's, that's not him. But, I'm hoping he's not going to say, well, you had this, a whole bunch of rules errors. So, because that turned out to be a 2-hour playthrough. That's the longest one I've ever done.
Wow.
But so I've developed a relationship with him because he's a wonderful guy, and I legitimately love his games. Legitimately, nothing to do with the fact that he sent me some prototypes to do. I legitimately love him. I'm rambling again, Richard. But anyway, I don't have any, other than Shem, I don't have any like real strong regular relationships. I've done some stuff here and there. The ones that I got from Gen Con, I filmed videos for. I did a thing for Feudum on the Dice Tower for their solo mode. I didn't try doing a playthrough of that because that's one that I worry that I would just, there's so much to keep track of. I'm afraid that would be a terribly difficult video to film, and you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's so complex.
I've heard it is on my kind of list of games I kind of want to experience. I don't actively court people. I kind of feel it's kind of like, I don't know, being somebody's friend and asking to borrow their car keys
right.
kind of thing, unless they're kind of getting something directly back. I mean, it's kind of like, I'm going to have Colby Dodge from
Plaid Hat,
Plaid Hat Games on, and I kind of like, I've spoken to Jerry, I've spoken to John Gilmore, I've had Isaac on, and I've kind of like, and here's the copy, and you can speak to our media person and stuff like that. And I was like, if I turn around after them coming on the show and giving me their time and then says, go and send us a copy of this game and this game, I'd feel it kind of, maybe I should, because I don't know, I was on Facebook the other day, and there was IDW put a post up. I think it was like the board game chat and trading thing, saying, "Oh yeah, we're renewing our media list for reviewers and content creators.
Right.
If you want to get involved in that, then please leave details of your thing below." And there was like 127 comments.
I think I was one of them.
It was 127 different people. Yeah. I just went, oh my days, imagine.
Yeah. I really struggle with this one, Richard. I really do. I go back and forth. And I may not have let you finish your thought.
No,
okay.
no. I mean, that is the thought, is that I kind of feel, occasionally like, Aaron West at Eldra Games, like he says, I did an unboxing for Catacombs Conquest, and he kind of sent me kind of like a pre-production to play around with it and things like that.
Right.
But it was to help kind of give feedback and stuff like that. But I would feel weird kind of approaching, I've dropped kind of ridiculously subtle hints to Weta to say, send me District 9, I will love you forever. But like all they just say is, if you come by the office again, we'll set the dogs on you. But
These
it's
giant
like
New Zealand dogs.
Exactly. I think they're just vicious sheep. But
that's kind of a. Isn't that one and the same? Is there a non-vicious sheep out there? Aren't they all vicious creatures?
Know. They're like cows. I've heard cows are horrifically. Any single news item, there is cow attacks women, and there's always about the cow. She went into a field and she had her dog with her, and her dog went off, and the cows went absolutely mental, and they just kicked her to bits. And, I look at cows now and I think, you're like, 3/4 of a ton.
That's right.
You're not a small animal.
Right.
But anyway, back to the point is that I don't think I'd love to go up. I'd love to be the guy that would, strut up to Gamelin Games, and go, hey, how's it going?
Uh-huh.
Do you understand? I got a podcast, yeah? Look at my podcast. Do you want to see my podcast with my listeners? Yeah. How about you give me a nice copy of that Heroes Land Deer and Sea?
Right.
I don't know if I could do it. I probably would make an idiot myself. But I still think there's some folk that do a much better job, and you see them coming home and going, got another package delivered today, and you're just like, how are you doing this? And it's probably because they're asking.
I think there is. And I'm going to make a horrible analogy, and I really hope this doesn't come back to bite me. But as a young lad, Richard, I was never very confident with asking people that I was interested in, young ladies out on dates, or even expressing my interest with them, right? I was just very, very self-conscious and always just terrified of rejection, right? And I knew somebody, he was a friend, he was more an acquaintance, but I knew somebody that had absolutely no fear. Now, and look, I'm not the most handsome man on the planet, but I recognize that this guy I was talking about was not terribly attractive, right? He just wasn't. He wasn't like a fiendish gargoyle, but he wasn't terribly attractive, right? But what he had was absolute and utter confidence, no fear, and he would ask anybody that he had a slight interest in if they wanted to go out. And, if he asked 100 girls, 98 might say no. But you know what? 2 of them said yes. And these were, generally speaking, attractive, at least to me, young ladies. Although, I found a lot of ladies attractive when I was a young lad. But I think that there's somewhat of an analogy here. Whereas I think there are some people that do sort of what we do, whether it's podcasting or videos or whatever the case may be, that just ask. They ask, and they must be producing something that the publishers are happy with, or else I've got to think that would be a short-term thing, right? Where you can promise the moon, but if you don't deliver, you're only going to get that first game for free. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that there are people that are very, very clear in what they want, but they are also able and willing to make commitments. That's where I have I'm very hesitant to accept anything unless I am sure that there's something that I can deliver. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And so that's where my difficulty comes in, because I don't want to overextend myself. I don't want to overcommit. I don't want to make promises that I can't keep. You know what I mean? And so generally speaking, almost everything I film are things that I buy myself.
No, I think that's the kind of the fear that is, I could probably, and I could, give a list of names to people and say, look, I've had all these people on the show, and if you send me a game, I'll do that. But then I'd be terrified that I wouldn't produce the necessary content to justify kind of getting that, and then I would be embarrassed and kind of shy.
Mm-hmm.
You have a nice collection I can see behind you. Okay.
Yes.
And as is our normal tradition, we have to, which I'd like to claim that I did this before Ben Maddox did with his 5 games for Doomsday. But if Dan contacted you, how he ever contacts you and went, Mike, You never guess what? Asmodee's been in contact. And said, Mike, they've said that they are going to sponsor Sporadically Board for 6 months. And as part payment, they're going to let us both have any 3 board games.
Oh my gosh.
That we would like. Now, it's the Asmodee Vault, so it can be anything at all. What 3 board games would you like? Now, it can be expansions, it can be first editions, it can be second editions, it can be shrink-wrapped editions, you know. And they've decided they're going to give you like a solo mode variant. They've actually got David Turtzian to make a solo mode variant for you as well. So what 3 games would you like, Mike?
This is, God, you know, and I knew you did this, and yet I still absolutely did not prepare. And so this is going to be just riveting audio. Let me think. Do
you want to put some background music in while you think?
Yeah, please do. Yeah. You know, one of the things I've seen, now this is not an Asmodee title, but I think that you're just using this as a nice framework to build this.
Asmodee. You know, if I'm trying to reach out to get sponsorship, I might as well go for Asmodee. You know, venture capitalists, couple of billion behind them. You know what I mean? Right.
They
could throw 50 grand my way, and it would, you know, they'd be just making up an interest within a minute. So there's no loss there.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. I would love to get the Rainier Knizia version of modern art that's in the little stamps. It's a little Japanese. I don't know if it's Oink. It might be an Oink game. It's this really rare version of modern art that is based off of little postage stamps. And I want to say that thing is selling for like $500, $600, something ridiculous like that. It's very, very, very rare. I know a lot of people probably say the black box edition of Glory to Rome, but I played it and I thought it was okay. I didn't play the black box edition, but I played a regular edition, the Cambridge, and I thought it was all right. So I'm not quite that enamored with it. You know, gosh, mine are going to be boring because they're going to be ones that you can kind of get. I really would like the Super Meeple edition of Java and it's Cusco now, and those Mass Trilogy games. I've got the Super Meeple edition of Mexica, but I'd like the other 2, Tikal and what they've redone Java 2, which is Cusco. So I'd like those. God, these are horrible. There are other ones I just am not prepared, Richard. I'm woefully unprepared.
That's you step in my house. This is what happens. You know what I mean?
I'm still, I'm actually a little bit disoriented from this whole cow discussion too. I think that's got me a little bit off my game, but that's all right.
You just have to watch. I mean, there's no videos out there, but there's definitely anecdotal evidence of cows attacking people, and it's one of the scariest things I ever read everywhere. Just to know they're quite intelligent.
Are there a lot of cows in Scotland?
I've got one downstairs.
Is that right?
In the garage.
That's fantastic.
We get fresh milk every morning.
Wow. Now I'm
Dan's got chickens. We keep herds of sheep and cattle.
Wow.
They just wander outside. They're just wandering up and down the streets.
Now, I've got a number.
That's not true.
I've got a number of Scotland questions that I'm going to have to save because I know that we're probably a little bit farther along in this podcast than to bring this up right now. But I'm going to be going to Scotland, to the UK for the first time in December, and we're potentially flying into Edinburgh. We're going to be definitely going to Loch Ness. It's one of my wife's bucket list areas that she wants to go, and so I may be picking your brain at some point.
You can actually nip in for a cup of tea, laddie, and we can experience some of the fantastic Scottish accent and some coffee.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely.
You'd be more than welcome. You'd be more than welcome to come back on the show because this has been an awful lot of fun. If people want to keep an eye on you on the internet webs,
yes,
where can we find you on the internet webs?
Well, on the wide world of the internets, you can find me at Solo Mode Games on YouTube. That's where I do my playthrough videos that we kind of chatted about a bit. I'm on the Dice Towers board game breakfast program, which has just been kind of revamped lately. It's now going to twice a week. So I'm either on Mondays or Thursdays, depending on when they want to slot me on there. And my little secret there is that I still will sometimes talk about solo games, but quite often I don't talk about solo games at all. I just talk about things that I find interesting. And then the Sporadically Board with Mike and Dan podcast that I do with the internet titan Dan Hughes. I said Hughes. I really went hard on the G that time. I don't normally do that.
That was quite hard. He's almost like the OG.
He is the OG.
He's so hard, G. He's the OG.
Yeah.
He's the OG. He'll not be happy that you've mispronounced his name.
He will
You're
not
never ever going to hear the end of this.
I lingered on the G. I really did. I floated around the G for much longer than normal.
I might edit out and then just re-voiceover saying, Mike just totally fucked up your name, Dan.
He'll believe you.
He will.
But for that podcast, you can find us on any of the, what do you call them? The podcast catchers. The
podcast catchers.
There you go. I think you can find us on all of those. I don't know what the hell a podcast catcher is, but I'm going to assume you can find us on them. We're on Twitter and Facebook. You know the whole thing.
Sporadically Board, and then it's sporadic. Is it sporadically.libsyn.com or something like that is the hostage place.
You can also, speaking of Dice Tower, we're now a proud member of the Dice Tower network, so you can find us on the Dice Tower homepage, has their little podcast list, so you can find us there.
I asked Tom if I could get on the Dice. I asked Tom if we could get on the Dice Tower, and he went right, okay.
Did you actually ask about that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I wouldn't. I don't know. You don't want some kind of strange Scottish guy on the Dice Tower.
I mean, Game Pit's on there. They're not Scottish, but I think that they share a certain sensibility. I think you share a certain sensibility with. I like to think that our podcasts are kind of kindred spirits in a way. Although you're much more involved in actual proper discussions with people in the board game industry, whereas we just kind of talk with people we want to talk to. But that's what you do too, though.
Yeah,
so,
I just talk to people I want to talk to.
Yeah.
It's great fun. And nobody's caught me yet and told me I need to stop.
No, I think you're doing a splendid job for what it's worth, for what my opinion is worth, which is absolutely zero. Keep doing what you're doing. I love it.
I really, really like your show and the joy and fun that you bring to the hobby, because it is, it's like a few miles of joy as opposed to a couple of acres of rubbish, right, as you would say. Uh-huh. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, go to the internet, search for We're Not Wizards, you'll find us. I'm not going to pollute the absolute joy I've had for the last hour and 10 minutes by self-promotion. But if you do want to find us, you can find us on Stitcher and Spreaker and Acast and Podknife and Podbean and all these other Castbox and Google Play and all these other wonderful places. And you can go to our website and Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else, because I can't stop once I go. I'm like Mr. Pop. If you do like what you've listened to tonight, you can do two things. First thing is to tell somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's always nice to be told that, it doesn't matter if you like us or not. Tell your enemies.
Indeed.
Tell anyone you know. And the other thing is, if you do like what you've listened to tonight, then jump onto Apple Podcasts. Now, you got to do two things for this. You got to search for Sporadically Board, and make sure you drop them a subscription, and you drop them a rating, you drop them a review, and do the same for us. Now, if you're going to give us ratings or reviews, right, we are gentlemen who try and maintain our egos. So don't give us 10 stars, because it will inflate them too much.
Yeah, that would be awful.
But don't give us 1 star though.
No,
because that's just rubbish. And look, we've earned this.
Yes,
we don't deserve 1 star, otherwise it'll make us cry. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average, and we're just a little bit average. But the absolute star that is Mike DiLisio, who's graced us with his presence. This is gold. It's not going to get any better than this. I'm telling you. You know, I might even make this episode 250.
Wow.
I've not decided.
Wow.
There you
I don't know what to say.
There you go. There's only two more things to say. The first thing is to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Mike?
We are not. Absolutely not.
Definitely not. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Mike. Say goodbye, Mike.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll sixes, plan your day or be a bit sporadic, but don't be bored either way. And if you can't like me, like Mike and Dan, because they are fantastic. And if you can't play with somebody else, play by yourself.
Very
in
sage
a little
words.
solo mode. There you go. But until the next time, goodbye.